She was 5 years old and she was going to unravel everything. That is the only thought moving through Nadia Calloway's mind on the morning the world she spent half a decade carefully, painfully, deliberately building begins to come apart. Not all at once, not with any warning, but in the specific quiet way of things that were always going to break, like old thread pulled by knowing hands. The marketplace in Crestwood is loud and warm and smells of cinnamon bark and dried lavender, and Nadia has believed, the way you believe in something you know is fragile but pray for anyway, that they are safe here, that 5 years of silence and sacrifice and sleepless nights cataloging every possible threat have been enough. She is wrong, because when the crowd parts, the way crowds part, not because anyone has asked them to, but because something animal and ancient in the collective registers the presence of power and steps aside before the mind has finished deciding to, when the tall silhouette at the far end of the market square turns its head and the autumn light catches the sharp jaw and darker than midnight eyes of the man she once loved with every reckless, unguarded corner of her soul, Nadia's lungs simply stop, and then her daughter laughs, bright, golden, catastrophic, and the sparks come. This is the story of what happened before that morning, and everything that came after. Stay close, because nothing about this will be simple, and everything about it will be real. Chapter 1. There is a particular kind of strength that no one ever writes songs about. It is not the strength of a warrior on a battlefield with blood on her hands and wind in her hair. It is quieter than that and heavier, and it lives in the chest of a woman who wakes up every single morning and chooses, deliberately, without applause, without anyone watching, to keep going. Nadia Calloway knew that strength the way she knew the sound of her daughter's breathing in the dark. Intimately, bone deep, without needing anyone else to name it. She had been living inside that strength for 5 years. Most days, it was enough. Crestwood was a small town tucked into the foothills of the Cascade Range in Washington state, the kind of place that existed peacefully between two worlds, human and supernatural, without making much fuss about either. The humans knew in the vague and carefully unexamined way that people know things they prefer not to think about directly, that some of their neighbors were not entirely ordinary. The supernaturals knew better than to draw attention. It was a quiet, mutual, unspoken agreement that had held for generations, and it suited Nadia perfectly. She had arrived in the dead of winter 5 years ago, with nothing but a duffel bag, $300 in cash, and a secret that would have shaken the entire supernatural world to its foundations if anyone had known what she was carrying. She found a room above the herbalist shop on Maple Street, offered to work in exchange for rent, and learned everything there was to learn about medicinal plants and tinctures, and the careful, patient art of hearing what a person's body was saying before it started screaming. Within a year, she was running the shop. Within 2, she had saved enough to rent the small cottage at the edge of town. Overgrown garden, creaky front porch, a single oak tree whose branches scraped the bedroom window on windy nights like a gentle reminder that the world outside was still turning without her permission. Her daughter's name was Lily. Lily Rose Calloway, according to a birth certificate that named no father, filed in a county 3 states away from where Lily was actually born, in a hospital that did not ask too many questions and did not keep the kind of detailed records that someone with resources and power and a burning need to find something could easily trace. Lily was 4 years and 11 months old at the start of this story, and she was, without question or contest, the most extraordinary creature Nadia had ever seen. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Dark-haired and golden-eyed, possessed of a grin so wide and uncontained it seemed like it might split her small face clean in half, but because she was so thoroughly, irrepressibly herself. Lily did not move through the world carefully. She crashed through it, arms wide open, curious about everything, afraid of almost nothing, loud in the specific way that only children who have been deeply and securely loved can be loud. She collected rocks. She asked questions. She climbed things she had been explicitly told not to climb. She once informed the elderly woman at the bakery that her bread smelled like wolf, and then went back to eating her cookie as though she had said nothing unusual at all. Nadia had spent the subsequent 48 hours in a cold sweat, but nothing came of it. Nothing ever came of it, until it did. Nadia's mornings followed a rhythm she had taken 2 full years to build, and which she protected with the quiet ferocity most people reserve for things they know are irreplaceable. She woke before Lily, always, lying still in the gray pre-dawn for exactly 5 minutes with her eyes on the ceiling, running the inventory she had learned to call her security check. Not because she was paranoid, though she was, reasonably and justifiably, a little paranoid, because she had learned the hard way that safety was not a state you arrived at. It was a practice, daily, deliberate, never finished. She would confirm, in her mind, every layer of the life she had constructed, the name she used, the story she told, the friends she had carefully cultivated, and the information she had just as carefully withheld. The wards around the cottage that the local elder, a retired witch named Marguerite, who smelled of bergamot and claimed to have once arm-wrestled a river spirit, had helped her set in exchange for a year's supply of her best chamomile and lavender blend. The wards were not perfect. Nadia had never been under the illusion that they were perfect, but they were layered and subtle and calibrated specifically to the energy signature she was hiding, and they had held for nearly 5 years without so much as a tremor. She told herself every morning that they would hold today too. Then she got up, made coffee, started Lily's oatmeal, and prepared herself for another day of being exactly ordinary enough. The herbalist shop was called Green and Quiet, a name Nadia had chosen because it described her ambitions exactly. She opened at 8 and closed at 6 and spent the hours between serving the steady, gentle stream of customers who came for everything from headache tinctures to sleep support to the very specific blend she had developed for the 3 or 4 pack-affiliated supernaturals in town, who experienced what Marguerite delicately called lunar dysregulation, a condition that mostly manifested as insomnia and low-grade aggression in the days surrounding the full moon, and which responded beautifully to valerian root, blue vervain, and a particular mushroom extract Nadia sourced from a contact in Oregon who did not ask what she needed it for. She was good at her work, more than good. She had a gift for it. A quiet observational intelligence that let her see past what people said they needed to what they actually needed, and the patience to formulate something that addressed both. People in Crestwood trusted her. They came back. They sent their friends. It was, in every measurable way, a good life. Small and careful in hers, built with her own hands from the rubble of something that had nearly destroyed her. And she was proud of it the way you are proud of things that cost you everything to build. What she was not, on most days, was happy. Not the deep, unguarded, chest full of light kind of happy that she had once known and spent 5 years trying not to look at directly. The way you avoid looking straight at the sun. She was content. She was grateful. She loved her daughter with a ferocity that sometimes frightened her in its completeness. But happiness, the real kind, the kind that didn't require constant maintenance and the ongoing, quiet suppression of memories that still had the power to wind her. That was a different thing entirely, and she had made her peace with not having it. Or she had tried to. Some mornings the trying was easier than others. The morning everything changed began like any other. Second Saturday in October, the weekly market in full swing, loud and cheerful, smelling of the season. Nadia had her standing arrangement with Petra at the honey stall, her weekly conversation with Marguerite, and Lily running loose in the open air for a few hours somewhere familiar, and watched and warded. One of the few times Nadia allowed herself to release the constant low-level vigilance she carried everywhere else. It had always been safe. 5 years of safe. Lily was wearing her yellow rain boots and her gray knit cardigan with the small wolf patch on the left pocket, a design Lily had drawn in purple crayon and presented as a formal request, and which Nadia had sewn herself because it had seemed important to honor. She was holding the wooden wolf toy in her left hand, a market purchase from 3 weeks ago that had not left her grip for more than sleeping hours since, narrating an ongoing story to it in a running murmur that Nadia couldn't fully make out, but which seemed to involve the wooden wolf making a series of increasingly complicated, heroic decisions. Nadia watched her from 3 feet away, with one hand resting lightly on the edge of Petra's stall, and the other curled around a paper cup of market coffee, and something in her chest. Some tight, guarded thing she'd been carrying so long she'd almost stopped noticing its weight. Loosened just slightly in the warm October sun. "She's got the look," Petra said without looking up from the jars she was rearranging. Petra was a tall, comfortable woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and the particular calm of someone who had seen a great deal of the world and arrived at a genuine peace with most of it. The same look you had at that age, the one that means something spectacular and probably alarming is about to happen. "I was not alarming at that age," Nadia said. "Your mother would disagree." Petra looked up, warm and lightly amused. "How is she sleeping?" "Better this week. The new blend seems to be helping." It was not entirely a lie. Lily had been sleeping through the night more consistently. What Nadia did not mention was that the past month had brought 3 separate incidents of Lily's power, slipping through the careful suppression Nadia maintained on her daughter's energy signature. Small incidents, minor, contained, but enough to send a cold thread of fear through Nadia's chest each time. A spill of golden light when Lily laughed too hard, a vibration in the air when she was startled. The wooden wolf toy once rising a full inch off the floor before Lily noticed and looked down at it in delighted, terrified surprise. And Nadia had crossed the room in 3 steps and covered her daughter's hands with her own and held them steady and said very quietly, "Not here, love. Not here." And Lily, who was 4.5 and somehow already understood more than she should have had to understand, had nodded, her golden eyes serious, and whispered back, "Okay, Mama, I know." She knew. God help them both, she knew. And that knowing in a child that young was its own kind of heartbreak. It happened fast, the way things that change everything always happen, not with fanfare, not with warning, but in the space between one breath and the next. No ceremony. The crowd on the far side of the market shifted, parted, and Nadia felt it before she saw it. A pressure against the wards on the square. Not a breach. Not even close to a breach, just proximity, something immense and deeply, terribly familiar moving into range. Her body knew it first, a low, bone-level recognition moving through her like a struck tuning fork, vibrating at the exact frequency of something she had spent 5 years trying to tune out. Her hand tightened around the paper cup. The coffee sloshed. She looked up. He was taller than she remembered. Or maybe she had simply spent 5 years making him smaller in her mind, whittling him down to something survivable. And now, here was the truth of him, full scale and undeniable, and her mind couldn't reconcile the distance between the manageable fiction and the overwhelming fact. Silas Wren, Alpha King of the Northern Cascade Pack, the most powerful supernatural in 3 states, possibly in the entire Pacific Northwest, certainly in every room he had ever walked into. He was dressed simply. Dark coat, dark jeans, the effortless understatement of someone who has never needed to announce himself, walking through the Crestwood Market with 2 members of his elite guard, flanking him at a respectful distance, not looking at anything in particular, just moving, the way powerful things move, unhurried, certain, the world rearranging itself ahead of him without being asked. Nadia did not breathe. Every instinct she had been honing for 5 years fired at once, and the instructions were clear and immediate and absolute. Get Lily, get out, don't run because running draws attention. Walk now, east exit, car, go. The bag under the bathroom floorboard. She turned toward Lily. Lily was no longer where she had been. She was 6 feet away, in the narrow aisle between Petra's stall and the spice vendor, and she had been walking toward a drop jar of amber honey when she tripped. On her own yellow rain boot, on a cobblestone, on the particular cosmic indifference of the universe to Nadia's careful plans, and stumbled forward and dropped the wooden wolf, and it clattered and spun across the cobblestones and came to rest precisely at the toe of a pair of dark leather boots, large, expensive, the boots of the Alpha King of the Northern Cascade Pack. Lily looked up. "Oops," she said cheerfully. "Sorry, Big Wolf Man." The world held its breath. Silas Wren looked down at the small, dark-haired child at his feet, and Nadia watched, from 8 feet away that felt like 8 miles, as his expression moved through a sequence she recognized in her bones. Surprise, confusion, the automatic assessment of power meeting power, and then something that stopped, something that cracked. Because Lily, delighted by her own clumsiness and entirely unaware of what she was doing, snapped her fingers the way she had been practicing all week because Marguerite had shown her how to make a small spark with dry air and friction. What came out of Lily's fingers was not friction, not air, not small. It was gold, warm, blazing, unmistakable alpha gold, royal gold, the specific frequency of power that existed in precisely 2 bloodlines in the entire supernatural world. And one of those bloodlines was standing 10 feet away in a dark coat, watching a 5-year-old produce his own power signature from her fingertips like it was the most natural thing she had ever done, because it was. The spark danced between Lily's small hands. Lily giggled. Silas Wren went completely, utterly still, and Nadia was already moving. Before we go any deeper, drop in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. We genuinely love knowing where in the world our Moonlit romance family is gathered tonight. And if you haven't already, subscribe right now. New complete romance stories post every single week, and you do not want to miss what's coming. Chapter 2. Nadia moved through the crowd the way she had trained herself to move through every dangerous situation in the past 5 years. Quietly, efficiently, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her back teeth, and her face arranged in the expression of someone who is absolutely fine. She reached Lily in 4 steps, scooped her daughter up in one fluid motion, tucked her against her left hip, turned away from Silas Wren with every intention of walking directly and unhurriedly to the east exit and out of this town and out of this life and into the next version of it. She would build somewhere further away, somewhere colder, somewhere he would never think to look. She had the bag. She had the account numbers memorized. She had a contact in British Columbia who owed her a favor and a car that could make the border in 4 hours if the roads were clear. She had planned for this. She had always planned for this. She made it exactly 2 steps before his hand closed around her arm. Not hard. That was the thing that undid her. Not the grip, but the carefulness of it. The way his fingers wrapped around her forearm with that particular, maddening gentleness she remembered and had spent 5 years trying to forget. The gentleness that had always existed alongside the enormous power in him, like a secret, like something he only allowed himself with specific people. She had once been one of those people. Apparently, some part of her body had not received the memo that those days were over, because the moment his skin touched hers, she felt it. The bond. That deep, involuntary, biological pull she had never been able to fully suppress, regardless of the distance or the years or the walls she had built, hitting her like a wave against a seawall, sudden and massive and devastating and absolutely unwelcome. Her body stopped before her mind gave the instruction. 5 years of accumulated longing, locked in a room and starved, which had apparently survived on nothing but memory and spite, making itself known at the worst possible moment in the worst possible context. Sarah. His voice was low, careful, like he wasn't sure the word was real. Nadia closed her eyes. 1 second. 1 second to acknowledge what was happening, and then bury it. Then she opened them, turned her head, and looked at him over her shoulder with the expression she had also spent 5 years perfecting. The one that said, "Nothing you do can touch me, because I have already survived the worst of you." "My name is Nadia," she said quietly. "It has been Nadia for 5 years. I would appreciate it if you would let go of my arm." He did not let go of her arm. His eyes moved from her face to the child on her hip, and she watched the moment it happened. The moment his alpha senses caught the thing she had spent 5 years hiding. His scent was on Lily. His blood was in Lily. His power was in Lily, currently sparkling very cheerfully between her daughter's fingers, in full view of anyone who cared to look. The expression that crossed Silas Wren's face in the moment he understood what he was smelling was the most terrifying thing Nadia had witnessed since the night she had left him, because it was not anger. She had prepared for anger, anger she could handle, deflect, use as fuel. What crossed his face was something far more dangerous: recognition, stunned, cracking, overwhelmed recognition. The look of a man who has been missing a piece of himself for 5 years and has just, without warning, found it sitting on a woman's hip in yellow rain boots sparkling. "She's mine," he said. Not a question. His voice had dropped to something barely audible, felt more than heard, vibrating at the register of something ancient and entirely beyond the social contract. Nadia turned to face him fully then, shifting Lily further onto her hip, angling her body slightly forward in the unconscious posture of someone who will, if necessary, become a wall. "She is mine," Nadia said, each word precise, each word carrying 5 years of weight. "She has always been mine. I am the one who was there. I am the one who stayed." Something flickered in his expression. Pain. Real pain, not the performative kind. She noted it and refused to let it matter. "You disappeared," he said. "You were gone. They told me." "I know what they told you." She kept her voice level. Around them, the market had gone very, very quiet. The particular quality of quiet that happens when a crowd of people simultaneously decides to pretend it is not witnessing something. "I also know what you told me. Before I disappeared, I know what you said, Silas." She watched the words land, watched him absorb them. "I remember every single word." She watched the color drain from his face. "Now let go of my arm." His grip loosened, not dropped, loosened. And in that fraction of movement, Lily, who had been watching the entire exchange with the bright, interested attention of a child who does not yet know enough to be afraid, leaned forward from Nadia's hip and studied the large man in front of them with the solemn scrutiny that very young children apply to things they are trying to categorize. Then she held out the wooden wolf toy toward him. "His name is Ash," she announced. "He's an alpha. He's very brave, but sometimes he gets things wrong and has to say sorry." A pause, perfectly weighted. "Do you know about that? About saying sorry?" The silence that followed was so complete, Nadia could hear the wind moving through the market banners overhead. Silas Wren, Alpha King of the Northern Cascade Pack, most powerful supernatural in the Pacific Northwest, looked at the small, dark-haired child holding a wooden wolf toward him and said absolutely nothing. His jaw worked. His eyes, and Nadia forced herself to look at them directly for the first time, were bright in the particular way that preceded grief. "I'm learning," he said finally to Lily, very quietly. "I'm still learning." Lily considered this with great seriousness. Then she nodded, satisfied, and tucked the wooden wolf back against her chest. "Okay," she said. Then, turning to Nadia with complete subject change energy, "Mama, can we still get the honey?" Nadia looked at her daughter's face, at the absolute trust in it, the complete, uncomplicated security of a child who has never once had reason to doubt that the person holding her will handle whatever comes. That trust was the thing she had built this entire life around. That trust was the thing she would burn every other thing to the ground to protect. She looked back at Silas. "We are leaving," she said. "Do not follow us." "Sarah." "Nadia." She turned and walked, and this time he let her go. But she could feel his eyes on her back all the way to the east exit, and she could feel the bond pulling like a tide, and she could feel, long before she reached the car, long before she got Lily buckled in and started the engine with both hands tight on the wheel while her daughter sang softly to the wooden wolf in the back seat. She could feel the exact moment she understood that running this time was not going to work. Because he had seen Lily, he had felt her, and whatever he was, whatever he had done, whatever inexcusable things he had said on the night that broke her world in half, Silas Wren was not a man who let go of things that were his. She had known that about him from the beginning. She had loved him for it once. Now it was the thing she feared most. She drove home. She put Lily to bed. She sat on the edge of the bathtub with her knees pressed together and her hands folded in her lap and stared at the wall and thought about what came next with the focused, cold precision of someone who has survived before and will survive again, even when surviving costs them everything it already cost them once, except that this time, she was not sure she believed it. And in the driveway of the small cottage at the edge of Crestwood, 2 hours after midnight, a pair of headlights cut through the dark and did not move. He was already here. And he was not leaving. Chapter 3. To understand why Nadia Calloway had run, you had to go back to the beginning, not the version she told people. The careful, abbreviated version about fresh starts and change of scenery, but the real beginning, the one she kept in the locked room at the back of herself where she stored things too large to look at directly. 3 years before Crestwood, a mountain estate in the northern reaches of Washington state where the trees grew so close together the stars came through in fragments, and a woman who had not yet learned to be careful fell in love with a king who had not yet learned what love required of him. She had been 24 when she met Silas Wren, working as a herbalist's apprentice, traveling between pack territories under the protection of a consulting elder, and the Northern Cascade Pack was the last stop on a 3-month circuit. She had prepared herself for a powerful alpha, Authoritative, territorial, probably difficult, because every alpha she had met had been those things to some degree, and she had developed a competent professional distance that served her well. She had not been prepared for the man who opened the door himself instead of sending a subordinate, who shook her hand and looked at her, not with the assessing gaze she expected, but with a startled, specific attention, like she had said something interesting before she'd opened her mouth. She had not been prepared for the intelligence in him, the dry, understated humor, the way he listened, completely, without the performance of listening that powerful people deploy as a social tool. She had not been prepared for the bond to snap into place the moment their hands touched. Quiet, absolute, irrefutable. Like a door closing on a life she had not realized she was leaving. The honesty of him, in those early months, had been the thing. He had not pretended not to feel the bond. He had not managed her at arm's length the way a man in his position might manage a complication. He had been direct. He had been present. He had made her feel. And this was the thing she had replayed the most in the dark nights in Crestwood when she allowed herself 20 minutes of grief before putting it away again. He had made her feel like the most important thing in any room she walked into. She had been foolish enough, unguarded enough, desperately enough in love to believe that feeling was the same as being true. They had been together 8 months when she found out she was pregnant. She had been terrified telling him, not because she doubted the bond or what they had built, but because of what pregnancy meant. The heir, the line, the political weight of a child born to the Alpha King and his mate. She had been afraid of all of that. She had not been afraid of him. Not yet. She had not yet learned that there was a version of Silas Wren she needed to be afraid of. The version that existed in the company of his counsel. They had been in the formal receiving room, not his choice. She understood that now with the hindsight of 5 years, he had not chosen that room. The meeting had been called there by his head of counsel, a cold-eyed woman named Helena, who had never looked at Nadia without a calculating assessment behind her gaze, and Helena and 2 other council members had been present, and Nadia had stood there with her news and her hope and her terrified heart, and she had watched Silas's face do something complicated when she said the words. She had watched him look at her, then at Helena, then at her again, and then make a decision. She had not understood at the time that it was a decision, had not understood until much later. But that was what it was. A choice made in real time in front of her about which version of himself to be. And he had made the wrong one. He looked at her with those dark eyes and said quietly, in a voice she barely recognized, "Nadia, you're extraordinary. But you understand, the heir to the Northern Cascade Pack cannot be born to someone who is not. This requires a certain standing, a certain history. I need you to understand that this changes things." She had waited. She had not spoken. She had looked for the man she knew, the one who listened, the one who did not perform, and found instead the Alpha King, who looked at her and kept going, the words coming out carefully, like they had been prepared for him. "You are remarkable to me. You will always be remarkable to me. But my people need a queen who was born to this world, who carries the right bloodlines, who the packs will accept without question. You were not raised in the pack world, Nadia. Your lineage is not." Helena has been clear that the council will not. He stopped, started again, his voice quieter now, almost gentle, which made it worse. "I am not asking you to go. I am asking you to understand what I can and cannot offer you." She had understood perfectly. She left before dawn with everything she owned in a single bag and a secret she had already decided he would not have the opportunity to use as currency in negotiations she had not agreed to. She understood with crystalline, heartbroken clarity exactly what kind of woman his council considered appropriate to carry the heir of the Northern Cascade pack, and she understood just as clearly that she would eat glass before she allowed her child to be raised in a court that had measured her mother and found her lacking. Whatever Lily was, Lily would be hers. Completely, unconditionally, without qualification. Nobody's bargaining chip, nobody's political problem, nobody's footnote. That had been her logic. Sound logic, she still believed it. She had never stopped believing it. But logic and grief are not the same thing. And the logic that had gotten her out of that house and across 3 states and into a new name and a new life had done nothing to address the grief underneath. The grief of losing not just a man, but a version of the future she had believed in, a home she thought she was building, a love she thought was real. She had processed that grief the only way she knew how, burying it under work and purpose and the enormous consuming love of raising Lily. And it had stayed buried, mostly for 5 years, until yesterday, until a hand on her arm in a marketplace and a pair of dark eyes going wide with recognition, and all of it, every carefully buried piece of it, came crashing back up through the surface at once. She was sitting at the kitchen table with cold tea and a candle she had forgotten to blow out when the knock came. Not on the front door, on the back door, the garden door, the one that faced the oak tree. 3 knocks, deliberate, unhurried, and then silence. She sat very still. She considered not answering. She considered genuinely taking Lily and leaving tonight. Then Lily's voice came from the hallway, small and sleep-blurred. "Mama? Is someone at the door? Is it the big wolf man?" A pause. "I think he's sad, Mama. I can feel it." Nadia closed her eyes, pressed her palms flat on the table, breathed in for 4 counts and out for 4 counts, the way Marguerite had taught her when the world required her to do something she didn't want to do. Then she got up, walked to the back door, and opened it. He was standing in the garden, 3 feet from the door, in the same dark coat, and he looked. This was the word that came to her, the one she resented immediately, wrecked. Not the controlled, composed alpha king from the market. The man standing in her garden in the middle of the night looked like someone who had spent 6 hours being dismantled by something that had the indecency to be invisible. His eyes found hers the moment she opened the door. In them was the thing she had refused to name in the market because naming it would have made it real. Desperation, naked and unmanaged and entirely undisguised. "I need you to tell me her name," he said. His voice was rough. "Please, just her name." Nadia's grip tightened on the doorframe. Every careful, strategic, survive this long piece of her said to close the door. And some other piece, the piece that had never fully recovered from loving him, the piece that had taken everything Lily said about the wooden wolf and applied it to the man who had given Lily her eyes and her power, and apparently also her capacity for precise and devastating emotional insight. That piece said very quietly, "You already know what letting him in will cost you. The question is whether it's worth it." She looked at him for a long moment in the dark garden. "Lily," she said. "Her name is Lily." She watched what that did to him, watched it move through him like light dispersing through water, spreading and settling, the way significant things settle. He pressed his hand over his mouth for a moment. His eyes closed. When they opened again, they were bright in the dark. "She showed me a spark," he said softly. "In the market. Royal Alpha Gold. I've never seen that from anyone who wasn't—" He stopped, swallowed. "She's extraordinary." "She's mine," Nadia said. The same words as before, but quieter this time. Less armor, more truth. "I know." And then, at last, the 2 words she had spent 5 years being certain she would never hear from him. I'm sorry. Not performed, not managed, not delivered to a council chamber or calibrated for political effect, just said in the dark to her. I need you to know that there is no version of what I said to you that I have been able to live with. His voice was unsteady in a way she had never heard before, and that unsteadiness cost him something. She could see it costing him, and he didn't try to hide it. What I did to you, what I let them do, I have not been able to live with it, Nadia. He said her name the way you say the name of something you have been afraid to say aloud in case saying it makes the loss of it more real. I know that doesn't change what happened. I know it doesn't give you back what I took from you. I just needed you to know. She stood in the doorway of the life she had built without him and looked at the man who had broken her and waited to feel certain of something. She did not feel certain of anything. She felt the bond, pulling and patient, the way it had always pulled regardless of what she told it to do. She felt the grief still there, honest and present. And underneath both of those things, quiet and dangerous as a lit match, hope, tiny and unreliable and probably very stupid. But there, you should go, she said. We can't have this conversation tonight. Lily is in the house. She paused. Come back tomorrow in the daylight. Come to the shop. She watched him process that. Watch the surprise of it, the understanding that she was not running tonight, that she was leaving a door open, carefully, conditionally, with 5 years of pain still standing in the frame. We will talk, she said. That's all I'm offering, talking. He nodded once. That's enough, he said. Nadia. Her name again, the same way. That is more than enough. She closed the door, stood on the other side of it with her back against the wood and her heart in complete disorder for a long moment. Then she heard Lily padding down the hall in her socks, and she straightened, and when her daughter appeared in the kitchen doorway with the wooden wolf tucked under her arm and her dark hair wild from sleep, Nadia opened her arms. Lily walked into them. They stood together in the candlelit kitchen, and Nadia held on very tight. Is he coming back? Lily asked into her shoulder. The big wolf man? Yes, Nadia said. Tomorrow. Lily considered this. Then, with the absolute and uncomplicated certainty of a child who has decided something is correct. Good. I think he needs us, Mama. Nadia pressed her lips to the top of her daughter's head. I think, she said carefully, that we need to be very, very sure before we let anyone need us, Lily. Do you understand? Lily pulled back and looked at her with those gold-dark eyes, his eyes, God, his exact eyes, and said with a solemnity far beyond her years, I understand, but I think he already does. I could feel it, even from far away. And upstairs, under the bathroom floorboard, the packed emergency bag sat untouched through the night for the first time in 5 years. Nadia did not touch it. She did not know whether that was courage or catastrophe. By morning, she was not sure the difference mattered. Chapter 4. He came at 10 in the morning, without the guards. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the coat, not the careful way he carried himself when he was trying not to overwhelm a space, not the way his eyes went immediately to Lily's crayon drawings taped to the shop window before they found Nadia behind the counter. The first thing she noticed was that he had come alone. No pack escort, no council, no political apparatus surrounding him like armor, just him. Walking through the door of green and quiet, with a paper bag from the bakery 2 streets over, and an expression of such careful, transparent hope that it made her throat tighten in a way she did not appreciate. He set the bag on the counter. The woman at the bakery said the lemon ones were your daughter's favorite. He paused. I didn't know what you liked. He stopped, started again. I realized on the way here that I don't know what you like for breakfast anymore. I used to know. I'm aware that I forfeited the right to know." He looked at her steadily. "I bought both kinds." Nadia looked at the bag, looked at him. "Sit down, Silas." What followed was 2 hours of the most difficult conversation she had ever had in her life, and she had several contenders for that title. She had prepared. She had spent the night making a mental list of everything that needed to be said. Every question, every accusation, every piece of truth she had been carrying alone for 5 years, and which she was now going to set down on this counter between them and require him to account for. She was not going to be kind. She was not going to manage his feelings at the expense of her own. She was not going to let the bond, or the sleeplessness, or the way the morning light was doing something completely unreasonable to the angle of his jaw, make her softer than the situation required. She was precise, and she was relentless, and she made him say all of it. Made him name what he had done, not abstractly, not in the diplomatic language of regret and circumstance, but specifically, the exact words he had used, the exact understanding behind them, the exact moment he had chosen his counsel's approval over the woman carrying his child. She made him say it out loud, and she watched him do it without flinching, his voice even, and his eyes on her face throughout. And she gave him credit for that, even as she gave him nothing else. He did not look away. He did not mitigate. He did not offer explanations as substitutes for accountability. He sat at her counter and received every word she gave him and said more than once simply, "You're right. There's no defense. I am telling you that I know that." "Helena told you to say what you said to me," Nadia said, not a question. He was quiet for a moment. "She gave me a script," he said. "She told me what to say to make you understand the situation without... She said you would stay, that you would accept a secondary position while the pack found..." He stopped himself. "It was a coward's choice. I knew what I was doing. I let her give me the words because it was easier than finding my own, and I told myself that easier was the same as kinder." His voice shifted, fractionally. "I was wrong about that in a way that cost you 5 years and cost me..." He looked at Lily's drawings on the window. "It cost me watching my daughter learn to walk, to talk, to make those." He didn't look away from the window. "It cost me 5 years of her and of you. I have been trying to calculate whether I can ask for any of that back, and the answer keeps being that I cannot ask for it. I can only ask for what comes next." Nadia was quiet for a long moment. Through the closed shop window, she could see the ordinary life of Crestwood going about its ordinary Saturday. And inside these walls, she was deciding something she had not let herself fully consider until now, because considering it had felt too much like hope, and hope had felt too much like exposure. "What is it that you actually want?" she asked, finally. "Not what Helena wants, not what the council wants. What do you want, Silas?" He looked at her, and in his expression was something so unguarded it was almost difficult to look at directly. "I want to know my daughter," he said. "I want to deserve the right to know her. I understand that is not a given. I understand I have not earned it, and I will have to earn it, and I am prepared to do whatever that requires on your terms, not mine." He paused. "And I have spent 5 years wanting to apologize to you, not as a tactic, not as a means to an end. I want you to know that what I did to you is something I have not been able to find peace with, and that matters to me regardless of what you decide, because you deserve better than what I gave you, and that is simply true." "I need you to understand something," Nadia said. Her voice was steady and completely serious. "Whatever happens, Whatever this leads to, whatever you ask for or I allow, Lily is not a negotiating position. She is not leverage. She is not an heir first and a person second. She is my daughter, and she is 4 years and 11 months old, and she has a favorite color, which is yellow. And she names every rock she picks up, and she talks to her stuffed animals, and she has never once in her life been made to feel like anything other than the most important person in any room. She held his gaze. If you want to be in her life, you do it on those terms. You see the whole child, not the power, not the bloodline, not the heir, the whole child. And if I ever see her being measured the way I was measured in that receiving room 5 years ago. She let the sentence finish itself in his expression. Do you understand me? Completely, Silas said. And Nadia. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the counter, and his voice dropped to something quieter and more direct than anything he had said yet. What I saw in that market yesterday was not a future heir. It was a little girl who tripped over her own boot and apologized to a stranger, and held out a wooden wolf and asked me if I knew about saying sorry. Something in his face shifted, tender and ruined and real. She asked me if I knew about saying sorry. She's 4 years old. He stopped. She is already more than I deserve. I know that. Nadia looked at him, at the man she had loved, and the ways he had broken her, and the ways he was, apparently slowly, trying to become the version of himself she had once believed he could be. She looked at the crayon drawings on the window. She thought of Lily, asleep in the back room, curled around the wooden wolf, completely unaware that the world she had been born into was rearranging itself in the next room. Come back on Tuesday, she said at last. For dinner, I will tell Lily who you are. Not everything, not yet, but enough. And you will be, she chose the word with precision, patient. You will let her set the pace. You will not bring your title or your pack or your counsel anywhere near this cottage. She looked at him. Just you. Can you do that? Yes, he said, immediately, without calculation. Yes, I can do that. She nodded once, moved his paper bag to the corner of the counter. Tuesday at 6. Nadia. He was halfway to the door. He stopped without turning all the way around, just enough that she could see his profile. This isn't me expecting anything. I want you to know that. I understand what you're offering. I won't. He stopped. I just wanted to say thank you for the door. After he left, she stood in the empty shop and pressed her hands to her face and breathed through the shaking. The full-body, reaction-delayed shaking of someone who has been holding herself completely still through something enormous and is only now, in the privacy of aftermath, allowing the impact to register. She was terrified. She was grieving all over again. The original loss, the 5 years, everything the middle had cost, and somewhere underneath both of those things, patient and stubborn and refusing to be extinguished no matter how much more sensible its extinction would have been. That small, dangerous hope was burning on. Tuesday was 3 days away, and in the cottage at the edge of Crestwood, a little girl with gold dark eyes and her father's power in her fingertips was dreaming. Deeply and peacefully, one small arm wrapped around a wooden wolf. Already, somehow, already knowing something her mother had not yet given herself permission to admit. Chapter 5. He brought yellow tulips, which was either coincidence or research, and either possibility made Nadia's chest do something complicated. He stood on the front porch at exactly 6 o'clock, not 5:58, not 6:02, exactly 6, which told her something about how much thought he had put into not overstepping. In dark jeans and a gray sweater that made him look less like an alpha king and more like a man who was trying very hard to be just a person, which was, she reflected, the correct effort. The tulips were in his left hand. His right hand was empty and slightly open at his side, the posture of someone who has made a conscious decision not to reach for anything he hasn't been offered. She noticed all of this in the first 3 seconds. She had always been an observant person. In the years since him, she had become a precision instrument. "Yellow," she said, looking at the tulips. "It seemed like a reasonable guess," he said, "given the rain boots." She stepped back from the door. He came in. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table with her coloring book and a row of markers arranged in a logic only she fully understood. She looked up when Silas came in and studied him with the same solemn assessment she had applied in the market. Then she looked at the tulips, then at Nadia. "He brought yellow ones," she said. "He did," Nadia agreed. Lily looked at Silas. "I like yellow," she said. "It's the best color. Mama doesn't agree, but she's wrong." She returned to her coloring with the air of someone who has delivered a necessary correction and considers the matter resolved. Silas made a sound Nadia, from the corner of her eye, identified as an almost suppressed laugh. She put the tulips in water and did not look at him. "Sit down," she said. "I'll finish dinner." What followed was the most extraordinary, ordinary evening of Nadia's recent life. Silas sat at her kitchen table, and Lily showed him her coloring book with the thoroughness of a curator presenting a significant collection, providing commentary that ranged from aesthetic, "I made the dragon purple because purple is a power color," to narrative. This part is where the princess decides she doesn't need the prince, and everyone is surprised. But the princess is not surprised at all, because she knew the whole time. To deeply philosophical. "This part is sad, but it's okay because sad things can have good endings," Mama says. Silas listened with his full attention, and Nadia observed this from the stove with a kind of painful, unwilling gratitude, because she had half expected him to manage Lily, to perform attentiveness the way adults perform it for children without truly being present. Instead, he was simply there, interested and responsive and asking questions that showed he had actually heard her, and Lily, who had her mother's instinct for the difference, was blossoming in it the way plants bloom when they are given actual sunlight after a long time under artificial light. Nadia had told Lily that morning, simply and carefully, that the man coming to dinner was her father, that he had not been in their lives before because of complicated grown-up things that were not Lily's fault and not entirely anyone's fault, and which Mama and he were still working through, but that he wanted to know her, and that Lily could feel however she wanted to feel about that, and ask whatever she wanted to ask, and take whatever time she needed. Lily had been quiet for a long time, which for Lily was significant. Then she said, "Is he a good person?" Nadia had considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "He's working on it," she said honestly. "I think he is really trying to be." Lily considered that. "Okay," she said, "that's enough. People who are trying deserve a chance." And then she had gone to get her coloring book, and Nadia had stood in the hallway and pressed her knuckle to her mouth and thought, not for the first time, that her daughter was significantly wiser than either of her parents. Dinner was good. Garlic roast chicken, lemon and herbs, a recipe from Petra, the kitchen warm and smelling of rosemary. And somewhere in the middle of the meal, Lily moved her chair without announcement or ceremony, slightly closer to Silas's side of the table. Nadia saw it. Silas saw it. Neither of them said anything, but when Nadia looked at him across the table, just for a moment, and he looked back with something in his expression so raw and grateful and barely held together that it almost bypassed her defenses entirely. She looked away quickly and gave the bread basket her complete attention. After dinner, Lily asked Silas to read her bedtime story, She asked him directly, without consulting Nadia, with the perfect confidence of a child who does not yet understand that this was an enormous thing she was handing him. Silas looked at Nadia over Lily's head. It was a question and a request and something else. Something that said, "I know this is more than I asked for." "Tell me if it's too much." Nadia nodded. Once. She sat at the kitchen table and listened to his voice carry through from Lily's room. Low and careful, and then gradually, as Lily corrected his pronunciation of the dragon's name, "It's Drakhorn, not Drakhorn, they're different," and added running commentary to the plot. "This part is my favorite, keep going, don't stop." Becoming something warmer, more natural, loosened from the effort of being careful into something approaching ease. She sat there and listened to her daughter's laughter and to the particular quality of quiet that followed the laughter, and she pressed both palms to the table and felt the wood under her hands and tried very hard to be honest with herself about what she was feeling. She was not going to call it anything yet. She was not ready to call it anything, but it was there, warm and terrifying and stubborn, and it had her name on it. He came out at 7:30, Lily asleep, the wooden wolf tucked in beside her, with an expression so open it was almost hard to look at. "She made me say goodnight to the wolf," he said softly. "She said he needs to know he's safe." Nadia's heart did something she had not consented to. "She says that to all the toys," she said. "She doesn't want anyone to feel unseen." He was quiet for a moment, looking at her across the kitchen. "She has your heart," he said. "The extraordinary thing in her, the way she pays attention, the way she makes people feel." He stopped, started again, quieter. "That's yours, Nadia. I want you to know I see that. I know where it came from." She stood up, moved to the window, looked out at the dark garden and the oak tree and the night beyond it, and let herself feel what it did to have the grief and the sacrifice and the 5 years of invisible, unglorified work, named and seen by the one person who had once made her feel unseen. "You need to leave," she said, not unkindly. "Before I say something I'm not ready to say." He came to stand beside her at the window, a foot of space between them, deliberate, respectful, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, close enough that the bond pulled, quiet and insistent, the way it had pulled every moment of the past 5 years, regardless of the distance. "Can I come again?" he asked. "Saturday, to the market or wherever is comfortable. I just want to keep coming, whatever that looks like, whatever pace you need." She looked at the dark garden, at the oak tree, at her own reflection in the window and the faint ghost of his, overlapping. "Saturday," she said. "To the market. Lily will want to show you the honey stall." She felt him exhale, slowly, the specific exhale of someone releasing something they had been holding for a very long time. "Saturday," he said. "Thank you." He left through the front door. She watched the headlights disappear down the lane. Then she went to check on Lily, and her daughter was deep asleep with one fist curled under her cheek and the wooden wolf pressed to her chest, and the room was warm and safe and smelled of lavender, and everything was not fixed, not even close to fixed, still complicated and fragile and carrying 5 years of weight, but something that was moving, slowly and carefully, in a direction that felt, for the first time in a very long time, like it might be forward. Chapter 6. 3 Saturdays after the dinner, Silas brought Lily a book about rocks, not a children's picture book, a proper field guide. Photographs, geological classifications, formation conditions, the kind of book an adult who takes someone's interests genuinely seriously would choose. Lily received it with the solemn reverence of someone receiving a religious text and spent the next 40 minutes at the honey stall, cross-referencing 3 rocks from her coat pocket with the index. Silas sat beside her on the low wall with the unhurried patience of someone who has nowhere else they would rather be, offering identification assistance when consulted and simply being present otherwise. Nadia stood 3 feet away, pretending to be interested in a display of dried wildflowers and failing to suppress what she suspected was an extremely visible and extremely inconvenient expression. Petra, at the honey stall, watched all of this with the benign amusement of someone who has been watching the world arrange itself for a long time and finds it reliably entertaining. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The thing about Silas in these weeks, and Nadia observed it with the attention of someone cataloging evidence for a case she had not yet decided how to rule on, was that he never pushed. He arrived when he said he would. He stayed as long as was comfortable and left when the atmosphere suggested it. He asked Nadia questions about herself, about the shop, about Crestwood, about the work she had built, about Marguerite, about her contacts in Oregon, and listened to the answers with the same quality of attention she had originally fallen in love with, the kind that made you feel like what you were saying mattered even when it was small. He did not press her on the larger things. He did not let the bond become a lever, because the bond was there, and they both knew it, and he could certainly feel it pulling just as constantly as she could, and yet he had not once, in 3 weeks, used it as an argument or an assumption or a reason to reach for more than she was offering. That restraint, in a person with his power and his history of having every door open for him, cost something. She was aware of how much it cost. The awareness was not helping her maintain the careful, measured pace she had set for herself. The week that changed things was the 4th week, and it changed things because of Helena. Nadia had known Helena would come eventually. She had known from the moment Silas appeared in the Crestwood market that the council would not simply accept his absence without an accounting, and that an accounting would eventually lead here, and that here would eventually lead to the door of green and quiet, with Helena's precise, cold interest on the other side of it. She had thought she was prepared. She found out she was not as prepared as she believed when Helena walked into her shop on a Wednesday morning and looked at Nadia across the counter with the exact same measuring gaze she had used 5 years ago in the receiving room. Pleasant voice, unpleasant eyes. "I wondered how long it would take him to find you," she said. "I knew about the child, of course. I've known for some time." She smiled. "Congratulations on your daughter, Miss Calloway. She appears to be extraordinarily powerful. The council will be very interested in formalizing her position within the pack structure." A pause, letting that settle. "As will the factions that have spent the past 2 years looking for a weakness in Silas's reign. A hidden, unregistered heir is quite the leverage point. I thought you should know that before you make any decisions about your future here." Technically, not a threat. Information, delivered helpfully. By a woman who had spent 20 years surviving at the highest levels of pack politics and knew precisely what she was doing and precisely what effect it would have. Nadia did not move. She felt the old fear rise, the old helplessness, the specific nauseating sensation of being measured and leveraged, felt it rise, and then, deliberately, with every piece of the strength she had spent 5 years building, she set it down. "Thank you for the information," she said. Her voice was steady and clear, and carried something in it that Helena had apparently not expected, because something shifted, almost imperceptibly in Helena's expression. "I'll let Silas know you visited." She held Helena's gaze. "And Helena," she kept her voice pleasant, "if you come near my daughter, or use her existence as currency in any political context, or make any contact with any faction regarding her. I will not run this time. I have spent 5 years learning what I am capable of. You should factor that into your assessment." She smiled and meant none of it. "Have a good morning." Helena left. Nadia called Silas before the door had fully closed. What happened next happened fast, and in the way that things happen when someone with real power stops being afraid of his counsel and starts being afraid, instead, of something that matters more. Within 48 hours, Helena had been formally removed as head of the Northern Cascade Pack Council, a move requiring a pack majority and which Silas had apparently been building toward for months, closer to completing than Nadia had known. Within 72 hours, the 2 council members from the receiving room had tendered their resignations under terms Nadia's contact in pack legal described simply as pointed. And on the evening of the 4th day, Silas sat at the kitchen table while Lily slept and said quietly, "It should have been done years ago. I let fear of fracture stop me from doing what I already knew was right. I am done letting that particular fear make decisions." Nadia looked at him. "Why now?" she asked. He looked back. "Because you're here," he said, simply, no calculation. "Because now there's something worth more to me than political stability." He paused. "And because my daughter is 4 years old and she taught a wooden wolf about accountability before she ever had a chance to learn that word, and I would like to be the kind of man she'd be willing to teach it to." The silence between them had a quality it had not had before, heavier, warmer, full of the specific weight of things said that cannot be unsaid, settling in the air of the room. Nadia felt the bond pull, and this time she did not resist it, or redirect it, or tuck it back behind its walls. She let it pull. She let herself feel, for the first time since the market, the full warmth of it. Not the grief-soaked version she had been managing, not the suppressed and starved version, the real version, the one that had existed between them before everything broke, the one that was still stubbornly and inexplicably entirely intact. "I am not there yet," she said. "I need you to understand that. I am not. I cannot be where we were, not yet. Possibly not for a long time, and I am not going to pretend otherwise." She looked at her hands on the table. "But I am not running. I want you to know that. I have made the decision not to run." "That," Silas said, and his voice was very quiet, "is everything." Chapter 7. The night it really shifted, not incrementally, not carefully, but in the deep cellular way that permanent things shift, was 6 weeks after the market. Lily was sleeping. The cottage was quiet. Nadia had been working late on a formulation at the kitchen table, and when she looked up, she found that Silas was still there, stayed after dinner to fix the garden gate, then stayed because Lily had requested a second story, then stayed because Nadia had made tea and the cottage was warm. And the conversation had moved, gradually, into territory neither of them had ventured in all these careful weeks. Not about Lily, not about the council or the past, about them. What they remembered, what they had lost, what it had been before it broke. She had been talking about the first night she arrived in Crestwood, the snow on the ground, the single streetlight at the end of Maple Street, the way she had sat in her car outside the herbalist shop for 20 minutes because she was so tired and so frightened and so entirely alone that she wasn't sure she had the capacity to open the door. She told it calmly, with the composure of someone describing something that happened to a former version of herself. Then Silas said, "I drove through 47 towns looking for you." She stopped. He was looking at the table, his hands wrapped around his mug, his jaw set in the particular way she recognized as the expression of someone speaking something difficult without looking for a response. "After the border report, after they told me you were gone, I spent 4 months driving through every town in a 3-state radius, not using pack resources, not officially, personally, because the bond was still there, and a bond doesn't stay active with no one on the other side. He paused. I knew you were alive. I knew it. And I told myself the reason I needed to find you was the bond, or the child, or the pack politics of an unregistered heir, and all of those were true, and none of them were the real reason. He looked up. The real reason was that I had said the wrong thing to the person I loved more than anything I had ever been given, and I could not live with not having fixed it. The word, that specific word, loved. Past tense. She had been about to say. She had been about to turn it into something manageable, but he held her gaze, steady and undefended, and said, Present tense. I am aware of the difference. The tea was cooling between them, the candle burning low, the cottage utterly quiet. Nadia looked at the man she had loved, and the man he had been, and the man he was working, visibly and painfully to become, and the last wall came down. Not all at once, not with a crash. More the way walls come down when you have been taking them apart brick by brick in secret for weeks, and one day you look, and the wall is simply gone, and the light is coming through. I am not going to be able to keep doing this, she said. He went very still. Doing what? He asked carefully. Pretending. She stopped. The bond pulled. She let it. That every time you are in this room, she said slower, I'm not aware of every single point at which you exist in space, that I have not been, her voice was steady, barely, that I have not been aware of it every day for 5 years, regardless of what I told myself about it. She watched what that did to him, watched him hold very still with the look of someone trying not to move in case moving breaks the thing that is happening. Nadia, he said, and the way he said her name, not as an address but as a statement, complete and full and carrying everything, undid the last of it. She stood up, moved around the table. He turned in his chair to face her, and she stood in front of him and put her hand against the side of his face. The first time she had touched him, deliberately, with full knowledge of what she was doing since the day she left, and she felt him inhale and hold it. I am still afraid, she said quietly. I want you to know that. He turned his face into her palm, his eyes closed. I know, he said against her skin. I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you don't have to be. She looked at him, at his face in her hand, at the 5 years between them and the bond and the grief and the hope, and the little girl sleeping down the hall with a wooden wolf tucked against her heart. And she leaned down and she kissed him. Softly at first, just the press of it, just a question. And he answered it with both hands, coming up to cup her face with a gentleness so careful it hurt. The kiss deepened into something that was not a question anymore. It was recognition. The kind that lives in the blood, in the marrow, in the particular intelligence of 2 bodies that have been separated too long and know each other the way things built for each other, know each other, completely, without translation, without effort. She could feel it everywhere, the warmth of him, the solidity, the specific and overwhelming rightness of being here, in his hands, after 5 years of absence. She could feel all of it moving through the bond, like light through a window that had finally been opened. He held her like something he had been afraid to hold, like something he had nearly lost and now understood the weight of. And she felt his hands against her face and in her hair, and understood, with the part of herself that had always been more honest than the rest of her, that she had never stopped wanting this, had never stopped wanting him, had been running from that wanting for 5 years, not because it was wrong, but because the cost of wanting something and losing it again had felt unsurvivable. She had been protecting herself from the wanting, and the wanting had survived anyway. Because some things do. They stayed like that for a long time in the quiet kitchen, his forehead resting against hers, her hand still cupped against his jaw, both of them breathing the same air. Not speaking, because nothing that needed to be said required words in this particular moment. Then she laughed, softly, almost to herself, and he pulled back just enough to look at her face. "What?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," she said. "Just—" She shook her head. "5 years," she said. "I kept that bag packed for 5 years." She felt his arms tighten around her. "The bag is staying unpacked," he said. She looked at him. "Probably," she said, and she was smiling. The real kind, the kind that comes from inside rather than being constructed for the situation. And he looked at it like something he had been trying to find for a very long time and had stopped believing he would. "Probably," he agreed softly. "I can work with. Probably." She let her head rest against his chest. His heartbeat under her ear was steady and slow, the unhurried rhythm of something that has been waiting and is no longer waiting and knows it. Outside, the oak tree moved against the window in the night wind, its branches tapping a soft, patient rhythm. The candle burned down. Neither of them moved to replace it. They did not need the light. They had found each other in the dark already. Chapter 8. Nothing about what came next was easy, and Nadia would not have trusted it if it had been. Real things are not easy. Real things cost something commensurate with their value, and the thing being rebuilt between her and Silas was worth everything it cost. And she was clear-eyed about both halves of that equation. There were difficult conversations, more than one, eventually including the mediating presence of a pack elder named Rosamond, who ran a territory in the northern hills and who had known Silas since he was a young alpha, still learning to carry his power without dropping it. Rosamond had the particular ability of very old, very wise people to be honest without being brutal, and her presence in those conversations kept them from becoming something that would need to be survived rather than learned from. There was a formal acknowledgement of Lily within the pack structure, conducted privately, on Nadia's terms, with documentation that protected Lily's autonomy and named Nadia as primary guardian with full legal and supernatural rights, requiring Silas's signature on provisions that his former counsel would have considered unthinkable. He signed without hesitation, without negotiation. There were boundaries set and tested, and some of them broken and then re-examined and reset more carefully, the way you do with something important when you are being honest about it instead of just hoping for the best. There was jealousy, occasionally, on both sides, old wounds expressing themselves in the present tense, because wounds do that and pretending otherwise only makes them worse. There was the long, slow, unglamorous work of two people deciding every single day to choose each other again, not because it was easy, but because it was right. Lily thrived. That was the thing that happened first and most completely, and which gave Nadia, on the harder days, the clearest indication that the direction was correct. Lily bloomed in the way that children bloom when they are given a larger version of what they have always needed. More love, not different love. She still had her yellow rain boots and her rock collection and her wooden wolf and her absolute conviction about the superiority of yellow as a color. She also had, now, a father who came to the market on Saturdays and read bedtime stories with increasing dramatic skill, and had learned, under her precise and unforgiving instruction, to say the dragon's name correctly. A father who sent her books, not just the rock field guide, but a star map, a guide to Pacific Northwest wildlife, and, memorably, a hand-bound journal with a gold wolf pressed into the cover because he had been paying attention and knew that Lily had recently begun narrating her own stories and deserved somewhere proper to put them. A father who was learning to be one in real time, openly, without pretending he already knew what he was doing. And Lily, who had her mother's instinct for authenticity, gave him full marks for the trying. She also had power, and that power was growing, and managing it required the combined knowledge of Nadia's herbalism and Marguerite's witchcraft and Silas's direct alpha instruction. And it required Lily to understand things about herself that most 5-year-olds do not need to understand. She understood them with a seriousness and a grace that made every adult in the room feel that they were, in some fundamental way, less evolved than this child in yellow boots. She learned to contain the gold sparks. She learned to breathe through the surges. She learned the specific, focused stillness that was the foundation of power management, and she learned it faster than anyone expected. On the day she held a full royal alpha flame, steady in her palm for 30 seconds without it growing or shrinking, Marguerite said quietly that she had never seen anything like it in 60 years of practice. And Silas looked at his daughter with an expression of such overwhelming love and pride that Nadia had to look at the ceiling for a moment to keep her face in order. There was also this. The bond between Nadia and Silas, fully acknowledged and no longer suppressed, proved to be exactly as extraordinary as it had always been. The specific, consuming, irreplaceable thing that mate bonds are when they are real. The kind of deep cellular recognition that makes the rest of the world recede slightly and the present moment expand. The kind that makes you understand why people throughout history have written songs and built cities and walked across continents for this single particular experience of being entirely known by one other person and choosing to be known by them and having them choose you back. That kind of bond. It had always been that kind of bond. 5 years had not diminished it by a single gram. In the privacy of the cottage, with the nights long and the fire burning and Lily asleep down the hall, they rebuilt what had existed between them, slowly and honestly, and with the particular attention of 2 people who have already learned what it costs to be careless with something precious. The tenderness was extraordinary, and underneath it was a passion that had not been managed or diminished by 5 years of distance, but had simply been waiting with tremendous patience for the circumstances to allow it to become itself again. When they were together in the warm dark of the cottage, with the bond fully open and the grief finally laid to rest, and nothing between them but the truth, she understood in those moments what she had been protecting herself from feeling, not because feeling it was dangerous, but because feeling it fully after so long was like coming back into a room full of light after years of careful dim, the brightness overwhelming in the best possible way, the kind of overwhelmed you do not want to recover from. She had no desire to recover from it. She let it be enormous. She let herself be in it completely, and she let him see her being in it. And that, the being seen, was the thing that finally, fully healed the wound the receiving room had made. Not because it was fixed, but because it was real. "You were right," she said to him one night, her head on his shoulder and the fire low and the world outside quiet. "In the market, when you said present tense." He pressed his lips to her hair. "I have been present tense about you for a very long time," he said. "I was simply too much of a coward to act like it." She was quiet for a moment. "We should have started here," she said. 5 years ago, we should have started with honesty." "Yes," he said. "We should have. But we started here instead, and I think—" He paused. "I think we needed to lose it before we understood how to hold it properly." She considered this. "That's a very generous interpretation of 5 years of exile," she said dryly. He made the sound she had come to love, the low, warm, almost laugh he reserved for moments when she said something that surprised him into honesty. "It's the interpretation I need to be able to live with," he said. "Feel free to prefer the other one." She smiled against his shoulder. "I'll keep both," she said, "for balance." Epilogue. It was a Saturday in May, 8 months after the market, 7 months after the Tuesday dinner, 6 months after Helena's departure and the formal protection of Lily's autonomy, 4 months after the night the last wall came down in a candlelit kitchen, and the Crestwood market was loud and warm and smelled of the first strawberries of the season. Lily was wearing a new pair of yellow rain boots, a size up from the October ones, and she was walking between her parents through the market stalls with one hand in her mother's and one in her father's. An arrangement she had engineered 3 weeks ago by the simple method of taking both their hands simultaneously and continuing to walk as though the matter were decided. The matter had, in fact, been decided. Lily had an instinct for arrangements that should exist and the complete confidence to manifest them, and nobody in the family had any intention of arguing with a 5-year-old who was this consistently correct. Silas was not wearing the Alpha King here. He was wearing the Saturday version of himself: dark jeans, a gray coat, Lily's current favorite rock in his pocket, because she had asked him to carry it for her until she found a better pocket. He was buying honey from Petra and listening to Lily's ongoing geological classification of the stall's cobblestones with the same full attention he brought to pack council sessions, which Lily had accepted as her due from the beginning. Petra watched all of this and said nothing, and looked at Nadia over Lily's head with an expression that communicated several complete paragraphs of quiet, benevolent satisfaction. The kind older women express when people they have watched from a respectful distance finally stop being stubborn and arrive at the obvious conclusion. Nadia accepted this communication with good grace and moved on. Marguerite was at her usual stall, rearranging crystals with the precision of someone who believes arrangement matters, and she looked up when Nadia stopped. "The ward signature changed this morning," she said without preamble. "You know that?" Nadia did know. She had felt it at dawn. A subtle but unmistakable shift in the quality of the protective energy around the cottage. Something deepening, becoming more layered, acquiring a second tone alongside her own. She had known what it was. The mate bond, fully settled and no longer fought, had begun to integrate into the wards. She was no longer warding alone. "I know," Nadia said. Marguerite looked at her for a moment with the dark, comfortable eyes of someone who has seen a great deal and finds the world reliably interesting. "Good," she said simply. It was time. She handed Nadia a small bundle of dried lavender and violet tied with a red thread. "For the cottage. For what comes next." Nadia looked at the bundle. "What does come next?" she asked. Marguerite smiled. The particular smile that meant she knew more than she was saying and had made a decision about the appropriate amount to share. "Something worth protecting," she said, "which is all any of us can hope for." That evening, back at the cottage, while Lily catalogued her Saturday rock acquisitions with meticulous attention, and Silas rebuilt the garden gate hinge he had been meaning to fix for 3 weeks, Nadia stood on the front porch in the warm May evening and looked at the oak tree in the gold evening light and felt, not perfect, not uncomplicated, not without the residue of 5 years of grief and the ongoing work of 2 real people trying to build something real in a world that does not always make that easy, but something better than perfect, something truer, the kind of happiness that knows what it cost, the kind that has been earned rather than assumed, and which carries, therefore, a weight and a depth and a staying power that the easy, unearned kind simply cannot replicate. She heard Lily's voice from inside, announcing that the largest rock of the afternoon was very possibly a piece of ancient volcanic basalt, and that everyone should come and look immediately. And she heard Silas put down his tools and say, "Coming," with the particular tone he had developed over 8 months of fatherhood, patient and genuinely delighted and a little bit awed every time by this person he had been given the chance to know. She heard the screen door open, his footsteps on the porch, and felt him come to stand beside her, close, his shoulder warm against hers. "She says it's volcanic," he said. "I've been informed I have 60 seconds before she requires a second opinion." "She's probably right," Nadia said. "She usually is." He turned his head and looked at her profile in the evening light. She could feel it without turning. The way he looked at her, the specific, unhurried attention of it, the present tense of it. "Nadia," he said. She turned. His expression was simple and completely open and held nothing back. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for the door, for opening it, for staying on the other side of it long enough for me to come through." She looked at him. The man, the father, the person she had loved and lost and found and was choosing again every single day with full knowledge of the cost and the worth, and she put her hand in his. "Thank you," she said, "for learning to deserve it." He smiled, small and real, brought her hand to his mouth. "Working on it," he said against her knuckles, "every day." Inside, Lily called for them again, with escalating urgency. They went inside together, hand in hand, through the door of the life they were building. Carefully, honestly, with love that had been tested and found true. And in the hallway of the small cottage at the edge of Crestwood, with the last of the May evening coming through the windows in warm gold, the lavender bundle on the shelf, and the wards settled and whole, and the wooden wolf on the kitchen table watching over everything. It felt, finally and completely and without reservation, like home. This has been I Hid His Secret Heir for 5 years, until the Alpha King Found Us, a Moonlit Romance Stories original. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of Nadia's courage, Lily's light, and the love that refused to stay buried, then you already know you belong here. Subscribe to Moonlit Romance Stories. New complete romances post every single week, and you will never be left with an unfinished story, where passion meets prophecy. We will see you next time.